Good morning from San Diego, California. This interactive teleconference is reaching you in English, Spanish, and Portuguese live through a unique and complex international telecommunications network via satellite, microwave, and cable. This program brings together distinguished organizations representing education, business, and government in more than a dozen countries in the Americas and Europe. During this video conference, we will examine transforming visions into productive outcomes, emotional commitment, and shared action. This is the 8th International Training Center video conference of the year 2002 series entitled Excellence with a Global Flair. I'm Professor Peter Anderson in the School of Communication here at San Diego State University, and I will serve as your moderator for this program. In an increasingly competitive and global marketplace, creating an imaginative, inspired vision of future possibilities is vital. We have entered an era of exponential change where old strategies and practices often fail to provide a useful roadmap for the successful future enterprises. The theory and practice of creating visions within organizations has expanded in recent years in response to an increasingly complex and competitive business environment that exists throughout the world. Great visions are essential, but operationalizing and implementing such visions is difficult. Nearly a century ago, sociologist Max Weber spoke of charismatic leaders, people with creative visions of how the world could be, who had devoted followers to help them implement these visions. Weber also spoke of the importance of the bureaucratic leader who may lack the vision but has the organizational skill and follow-through to make a vision a reality. The vision of the charismatic leader may not be enough. Implementation of vision is as important as having a creative vision in the first place. Organizations are often resistant to change. People have a vested interest in doing things the old, comfortable, familiar way. Change sometimes requires reinvestment in new technology, retraining of workers, and adoption of unfamiliar and unsettling practices and innovations. A vision should be more than a corporate image. It should be a commitment to action. Today we are most fortunate to have with us two experts in transforming visions into concrete business outcomes in education, business, and government. Mr. Thomas Hoffmann, who joins us today via phone from Stockholm, Sweden, is founding partner of Essential Experiences Associates, a management consulting firm focused in helping Fortune 500 companies understand these organizational characteristics which will lead to higher levels of employee contribution, performance, and satisfaction. Since 1996, Mr. Hoffmann has worked with companies in North America, Latin America, Europe, Asia, and the South Pacific. Originally from Wisconsin, Mr. Hoffmann began his career at AT&T in 1970 and spent 26 years in line sales, operations, and corporate staff positions. From 1989 to 1991, Mr. Hoffmann was Administrative Director of Quality for AT&T's Western region. He served as a certified senior evaluator for the Malcolm Baldrige Award criteria for the period 1990 to 1993. He has been a guest professor at Estonia Business School in Tallinn, Estonia since 1992. Mr. David Chaudron, originally trained in industrial psychology, is managing partner of Organized Change. He has over 20 years of experience with a wide variety of organizations, including those in manufacturing, electronics, non-governmental organizations, petrochemicals, biotechnology, and government, banking, and financial service sectors. Dr. Chaudron has assisted organizations in planning their strategies, changing their organizations, surveying their employees, building their teams, and improving the leadership style of their executives. He has worked internationally in North America, South America, Europe, and the Middle East. Mr. Chaudron is a frequent lecturer for quality for organizations such as Alliance International University, the American Society of Quality Control, and the Manufacturing Institute. Dr. Chaudron is author of over 25 articles on strategic planning and organizational change, and a columnist for the President Newsletter, a publication of the American Management Association. He is also author of the forthcoming book, No More Darn Buzzwords, Keys to Successful Organized Change. Gentlemen, welcome. Let's start with this question. How do you overcome vested interests that oppose a new organizational vision? Tom in Stockholm, do you want to take a stab at that first?
Okay, Peter, thanks. I think one of the things that we need to understand as we confront resistance is understanding the person who is resistance, what are their motivations. And one of the keys to getting people to change, one of the keys to getting people to implement a vision is linking something in there to their own motivation. So getting the people to think about their own motivation, their personal dreams, how do they link it and get something out of this so that they can move forward. And I'm sure David would like to add to that.
Indeed, David.
Thank you. I think going back to what you were really saying at the beginning, you really have to make people more comfortable in the area where the new vision is and less comfortable in the old-fashioned way that they are accomplishing those particular activities.
And how do you make them less comfortable?
Usually providing incentives, monetary incentives, as well as encouraging them to actually become part of the development of the vision itself.
Well, thank you for those initial and excellent insights. Now we're going to begin with Module 1 of our show.
Has it happened to you? You have spent a great deal of time thinking about where you want to take your organization. You've engaged many people throughout the organization to participate. And you have even spent time at a weekend retreat with the leadership of the group, defining and carefully wording the new vision statement. Now you have returned to work, and the excitement initially reflected in the group seems to be waning. The whirlwind of everyday work seems to be sucking everyone back into their routines. The new dream seems to be escaping your grasp. The challenge of implementation is one that faces every organization or institution as it embarks on giving life to its vision. We have discussed some aspects of that challenge during these programs over the past several years. Last year, we spoke about the challenge as one of recognizing that at the heart of implementing a vision is change. We explored that understanding. How change takes effect in your organization is critical to implementing visions. Understanding how leaders personally deal with change. Understanding how leaders implement change. Understanding how to communicate change. Understanding how employees embrace or do not embrace change. Dr. David Chaudron of Organized Change will expand on that concept during this broadcast as well. During this segment, I'd like to spend some time covering several key concepts and models that might assist you in your implementation efforts. These are concepts and models that I have watched several companies use to successfully move their companies closer to making their visions a reality. Successful implementation of vision begins with how the leaders personally think and feel about the vision they have participated in creating. The success of implementation of vision requires leaders express their feelings with conviction because those emotions are clearly authentic and rooted in deeply held values, wrote David Goleman. Successful implementation requires leaders tune into their own feelings and that of the other people within their organizations to arouse passion for pursuing the new vision. To be successful, leaders must be self-aware. Daniel Goleman, in his new co-authored book, Primal Leadership, writes, quote, "Ultimately, the most meaningful act of responsibility that leaders can do is to control their own state of mind. Effective leadership demands the capacity for managing one's own turbulent feelings while allowing the full expression of positive emotions to nourish vision implementation." Unquote. Recall that a vision is desirable, future state rooted in the values of the organization that we do not yet know how to reach. So when we implement a vision, we are really talking about those first steps we take to get us closer to finding the connections that will allow us to reach our vision. We call those first steps strategies. Implementing vision begins with implementing our first steps, strategies. One approach we find helpful for implementing strategies is viewing the implementation process through the lens of our human performance model. Essentially, the model helps us understand those components that should be addressed if you as an individual or as an organization wish to move from one level of performance to a higher level of performance in a business setting, moving from one level of current success to a new vision of success. Let's briefly look at the model. Our model begins with one's self-awareness, namely the intellectual and emotional lens being used to interpret and view the world. And then the model moves to understanding the current state, the current level of performance. Next, it asks us to envision the desired state, the new level of performance. In a sense, the vision. And finally, it requires us to assess how to close the gap that exists between current and future performance. The first and core component of the model is the intellectual and emotional lens that is called mindset, namely, how we currently think about the subject and our emotional self-awareness about the subject. What is our relationship to it? What values are reflected in our response? This component asks us to look inward and understand the intellectual and emotional lens we are using to approach, view, understand, and converse about all aspects of implementing a change in performance. The second, third, and fourth components of the model help us assess what one needs to consider if one actually wants to move to a new level of performance. The second component is knowledge. What new knowledge or information must be acquired to successfully move from one level of performance to the next? In this component, we include not only what new knowledge must be gained, but also include the ability to apply that knowledge, namely, what skills must be acquired or enhanced to move to the new level of performance. The third component is practices. What practices do I choose to employ regularly and consistently? The distinction drawn between knowledge and skills and practices is this. I might have the knowledge I need to do something. I might have the requisite skill to do something. But I might not choose to put either of those into daily use or practice. Understanding why we choose to or choose not to employ those practices required to reach a new level of performance is critical and directly linked to one's lens or mindset. The fourth component of the model is architecture. Architecture includes all those personal and business processes, structures, and systems that we have designed consciously or unconsciously to more easily and consistently negotiate life or to make the business run smoothly. Any change in performance for an individual or a group require that one assess all those processes, structures, and systems to determine if any of them need to be modified eliminated, replaced, or retained. By addressing all four components, mindset, knowledge, practices, and architecture, an individual or group can move in a new direction, achieve a new level of performance, and for our discussion, move toward a new strategy, a new vision. Let's return now and look more closely at each of the four components. For our discussion here, I will talk about the model as it might apply to an individual. I believe you will be able to make the transition in applying the same concepts at the group level. The first component and most pervasive is that of mindset. How one thinks and feels about things. How we have consciously or unconsciously developed, or as a friend of mine in the computer business says, programmed, our thinking and emotional responses over the years, how that directly impacts what is available to us in how we understand and interpret and respond to the world around us. It even underlies how we view this model. Namely, how does our thinkings and our feeling impact how we understand and interpret and respond to the components of the model? Our current performance, our desired performance, our knowledge or skills to achieve the new level of performance, or how we look at the choices of practices we employ and the elements of architecture we have created to assist us. Fundamental to understanding our mindset is recalling that we each create our own reality and we understand understanding of the world around us. As we created those realities and emotional connections, we used information provided by our parents, by our families, by our communities, by our cultures, by our religious beliefs, etc., to understand and provide meaning to the happenings and the world around us. As we grew and built on our experience base, we used that information to help us create our own understanding of the world around us and help us ascribe meaning to the experiences. Along the way, we experimented with various ways of thinking and behaving and selected those ways of thinking and behaving that allowed us to be more successful and/or helped us make sense of things. In general, we experimented, we selected, and now we operate from a set of beliefs and emotional connections, conscious or unconscious, which we assume continue to help us be successful and/or help us make sense of things as we progress through life. To varying degrees, we use this set of filters to understand and act. Becoming self-aware of those filters allows us to assess whether filters that we may have adopted years ago continue to serve us or are limiting our ability to see other options or possibilities. Let's take an example. Let's say I'm a mid-level manager or leader working in a geographically dispersed company that's implementing a new vision, and that I grew up in a culture that is highly paternalistic. My boss grew up in a highly entrepreneurial setting. As a way for me to be successful and get along, I learned that it was best for me to wait for the person in charge to tell me what to do. So as I enter the workforce, I bring with me a set of thinking and behaviors that unconsciously support the behavior to wait for the boss to tell us what to do. What do you think the impact of that unconscious thinking and set of behaviors will have in relationship with my boss? What do you think the impact of that unconscious thinking and set of behaviors will be on the effectiveness of my group? What emotions do you think will be experienced by my boss, by me, by my group? Will my thinking and emotional responses facilitate or hinder those around me in achieving the company's new vision? I use the example not to make a judgment about paternalism, but rather show that we each have developed a mindset based upon the influences and experiences we have had. Further, until we get feedback to help us see the lens we are using, we won't be able to make other choices in our effort to move from the current level of performance to a new level of performance. Applying this component of the model to vision implementation, each of us will use a different set of filters and assumptions as we look at the vision. Each of us will have a different emotional response to the vision. Each of us will interpret what it means for me and what I might have to do. For us to begin to successfully implement a new vision or new strategy, we must be self-aware of our own response and integrate the intellectual and emotional responses of others. We must ask, am I empathically listening to the responses of others so I can find keys to unlocking their motivations for achieving the vision or strategies? Are the filters I am using assisting or getting in the way of being open to the multiple possibilities that could lead to achieving the vision? Are my emotional responses facilitating or hindering me and those around me from becoming passionate in the pursuit of the vision? Are the actions I'm taking demonstrating alignment with the vision, or are they creating confusion for others? Returning to the model, we will each use the same lens as we address the other components of the performance model. Namely, how do I think and feel about knowledge and skills? How do I think and feel about implementing practices? How do I think and feel about architecture and its elements? Of particular importance for our discussion is how we use that lens in understanding and examining the choice of practices we decide to use. Maybe an example will help. Let's say that you've been asked to take a position in sales. So the company sends you off to training where you have acquired the knowledge and learned the skills to be an effective salesperson. However, when you do make a sales call, those who observe you find that you do not use the knowledge or demonstrate those skills you possess. What's happening? You know what to do, and you have the skills to do it. And you know that you'll become more effective if you do it. Why do you choose not to practice it? What is your thinking, what emotional responses, or what gut feelings are keeping you from making a different choice? What experiences have you had that are impacting how you think about sales or your role as a salesperson? What is your mindset about sales and selling? Take note of how that lens affects the choices of action you take, the practices you employ. The same mindset examination needs to be asked when looking at implementing strategies to achieve a new vision. We suggest the examination needs to take place for each individual leader, for the leadership group, and for the organization as a whole, and for subgroups. Why? If you can first put clarity around how you individually think and feel about the strategies leading to the vision, or how you think and feel about what you believe must be done to implement the strategies leading to the vision, you will begin to discover critical insights into what is holding you from employing practices to move the implementation forward. If, as a leadership group, you can first put clarity around how you collectively think and feel about the strategies leading to the vision, or how you collectively think and feel about what you believe must be done to implement the strategies leading to the vision, you will begin to discover critical insights into what is holding your group and organization from practices to move the implementation forward. Recognizing what might be holding one back from practicing what he or she knows will aid in the next step, examination of what new knowledge and the individual or the organization must acquire to successfully implement the strategies or vision. Depending upon what knowledge is needed, think carefully about who needs what and when they need it, and build it into their objectives. Do the same analysis for people's ability to apply their knowledge, their skills. From our experience, we find most organizations believe they do not have the knowledge and skills to do what must be done. So they quickly invest in training as a solution. We've found otherwise. Most organizations have the knowledge or easy access to the knowledge, and many times they have the skills, but they do not practice or use them regularly. So we are back to another examination of mindset. This time around, making a commitment to action. As I mentioned several years ago, there are 3 components that must be present if I'm going to do something. I must believe it's possible, I must want to do it, and I must commit to doing it. A quick example. I believe I can lose 20 pounds. I want to lose 20 pounds, but I keep eating the cookies. I'm not committed. So what in my thinking, conscious or unconscious, what feelings are keeping me from committing to do it? How do you understand, think, and feel about making a commitment? Be honest in this examination of yourself and with others. The final component of the model is architecture. Architecture exists at the individual level. It can include the personal processes or habits I've established to operate successfully in various situations, social and business. These will be closely related to the self-examination of mindset, since they are the behavioral manifestation of my thinking and feelings. These process and habits need to be checked for alignment with how I can contribute to achieving the strategic goals. At the organization level, architecture encompasses the policies, processes, and systems that have been designed to operate the business and facilitate work. Many times, the policies, processes, and systems were designed to achieve a different vision. Each should be examined to align with the new direction. In summary, by applying the human performance model to the implementation of a vision, we find that our mindset or intellectual and emotional lens and the organization's collective mindset are critical for successful implementation. Understanding how we think and feel about where we want to go, understanding how we think and feel about what we need to know and do, understanding how we think and feel about practices we choose to employ, and understanding how we think and feel about the support architecture may be the most important step in implementing strategies to achieve a new vision. We have found that linking the performance model with the balanced scorecard, something that you have heard from other experts on this program, creates a disciplined approach for connecting the vision strategy to the action level. It creates a framework within which organizational members can engage in conversations and develop relationships that will uncover and clarify their thinking and emotions. Through those conversations, you will discover those actions that will motivate and generate passion in achieving the company's strategic and visionary goals. Today's leaders, writes Daniel Goleman, and I quote, are called on to build their companies by creating the future rather than investing in the past. Vision matters more than ever. Improving your organization's competitiveness and performance contribute to creating that future. The future that is most often fulfilled for all types of organizations in all countries and across all cultures is one that begins with a clear, exciting, and challenging vision. Only when implemented can that dream created by the vision be achieved? You have a dream. You have a vision. It is only achieved when implemented.
Let's begin with the first question and answer session. We will try to answer as many questions as possible. Therefore, we ask that only one question be asked for phone call, and that these questions be as brief as possible. You may call the studio directly at the phone number or fax which appear on your screen. We remind you to make your phone calls at a distance from the monitor to avoid feedback. Our first question is from Medellin, Colombia, from Finalco, and this is a fax question, and they want to know, how do you know what your core competence is? David, you want to
Sure.
take a stab at that?
Oftentimes what companies do when they're asked what they do best is they immediately, if you will, mouth off and say, well, we're really good at X or Y or Z. It's not so simple as that. It often requires a significant amount of analysis. It requires a significant amount of benchmarking, and it requires a significant amount of discussion in and among the senior and middle management really to discover what their core competence is. It's not necessarily what on the surface is what you're good at.
Tom in Stockholm, anything to add to that?
I'd also suggest that at the personal level, the leaders particularly understand their competence and what they're good at, because it's through that self-awareness of what they're good at and through their emotional